Hello there, my name is Gary Sims and this is Gary Explains. Now, it seems like every day we're hearing news of new security breaches, new privacy breaches, email addresses exposed, phone numbers exposed, social security numbers exposed, and the internet can be quite a dangerous place. And more than that, we see attacks on equipment in our own homes or in our offices, particularly IoT devices and so on. So although this may not seem like an interesting subject, firewalls are actually something that could be more and more important as we go on through the next few years. We've kind of relied on the modem or the router that we get from our ISPs and said, well, they're good enough to protect us. But maybe we need to take a proactive approach and do more. And to that end, today I want to look at the Firewalla Gold. It is a prosumer or small business firewall, and it's actually a pretty interesting device once you get into it, and gives you more than just firewall. There's so much that it can do that even a prosumer or an advanced home user would certainly find it a useful addition to your network. So if you want to find out more, please let me explain. Okay, before we go any further, I would like to point out this is not a sponsored review. I'm not being paid for this review. However, Firewalla were good enough to send me a review unit. There is a link in the description. It's not an affiliate link, it's a tracking link, just so that I can see how many kind of people are interested in these things and actually click through to the product itself. Okay, let's carry on. So as I've mentioned, it's got 4 gigabit Ethernet ports on it. And they support a maximum throughput of around 3 gigabits a second. So all the ports really can be working pretty hard and get full speed out of them. It's got 4 gigs of memory, 32 gigabytes of internal storage, and it's got an Intel Celeron quad-core CPU in it. It's fanless, aluminium design. So we're looking at some pretty good hardware here in terms of this being both a router and a firewall. So looking around the box, we can see that it has 4 fully routable Ethernet ports, and they are conveniently numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. And the 4th one, which has that yellow square around it, is actually the default WAN port. So that's what you'd connect out to your outbound internet, and the other 3 you would use for your internal network. And we'll talk more about the setup in a moment. Looking on the other side, it's also just worth pointing out there is this red dongle, which is plugged into the USB port. It's actually a Bluetooth dongle, which is used for pairing the device up with your smartphone. And the HDMI port is not used at the moment, and of course there's an off button and a reset button. Okay, so let's get into how you use this thing. It has 2 modes. It's got what's called router mode, where it sits inline in your network, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, and simple DHCP mode. Now, to use the router mode, you need to use the Firewalla Gold as your main router. So we're talking about replacing your main router here, or at least putting it after your main router in the network topology. We'll talk more about that in a second. If you don't want to do that, or you can't do that, then really the Firewalla Gold is not for you. The other mode, simple DHCP, becomes it's just more monitoring that happens because it's on the network rather than actually everything is going through the router out onto the internet. So it really, if you're not going to put it as your main router, it's not worth using it, in my humble opinion. But if it is in router mode, it can manage all your traffic because everything has to go through it before it gets out onto the internet. All the routing functions of your network are handled by the Firewalla, and each LAN port can be configured as individual network segments or even as one big segment. There's lots of flexibility in what you can do. So here on the left, we might see, let's say, a traditional setup. This is the kind of thing I've got. I've got a modem Wi-Fi router from my ISP, and it's got some Ethernet ports, and I either connect into that or use Wi-Fi, and it sends the traffic straight out onto the internet. Now, if you're using the Firewalla Gold, you need to put it in between the rest of your network. So you disable Wi-Fi on the router from your ISP. You put in the Firewalla Gold, which you connect via that 4th port over to your router from your ISP, and then you need to connect in some kind of other access point. You'll probably need to buy one if you don't have a spare one, some other kind of router that acts as an access point. And so Wi-Fi and wired connections all come into the Firewalla Gold. You don't want anything going into your ISP's router other than the Firewalla Gold itself. That way, everything has to go through the firewall before it goes out into the internet. Everything that comes off the internet has to go through the firewall before it gets onto your LAN. And that's how it works in its most optimized form. Now, of course, there are variations of that. You may have some kind of modem, cable router or something like that, and then you have already an existing Ethernet cable over to some kind of access point. So you've got a kind of 2-device setup there. Same thing, you need to keep the cable modem, the modem from your ISP. You need to connect it to the firewall. Then the firewall then connects to your access point. So again, everything has to go through the firewall before it gets to the internet. And the same thing again, if you've kind of got a mesh network, here again, some kind of modem, router from your ISP, that connects into one of the base station for the mesh network. I do have a video on this channel about mesh networking if you are unfamiliar with it, see how it works, tri-band mesh networking and so on. I recommend that. And so again, you need to put the firewall between the kind of the first node in your mesh network and the internet connection from your ISP. So it always has to, everything has to go through the firewall. If you're not prepared to set it up like that, then really this isn't the product for you. Now, the other thing, and this got me a few times when I've been playing with this, is that in any situation, how you configure it after you've put the Wi-Fi after the firewall, you have to make sure it's in access point mode or bridge mode, not in a kind of a normal router mode. Because if it is, it will think it's connecting to the internet directly and it will start to do network address translation. I've got a video on NAT here on this channel as well. If you're not familiar with that, recommend you watch that. And then you get double NAT, which basically means that everything that comes through the firewall just looks like one device. It just looks like one device and everything's hidden behind the router. You want to disable that and turn it into bridge mode or AP mode to do that. If you do that, you get much better kind of firewall control over the individual devices on your network. Okay, so what do you do once you've wired it up like that? The first thing to do is download the Firewall app, the Firewalla app from for Android or for iOS. This is where I got lost a few times because I'm so used to configuring things with just a network interface. You know, you kind of plug in a laptop into 192.168.1.1 and then you kind of do it that way. It's not how you do it with the Firewalla. You have to use your smartphone. It has to have Wi-Fi connectivity available, and it has to have Bluetooth. So you download the app, you then ask it to find a nearby Firewalla Gold device, and then once it finds it via Bluetooth, you then have to scan the barcode that's on a sticker on the device, and that way it pairs it up. You need to make sure that your mobile phone has internet access at this time, but probably through cellular, not through Wi-Fi. And you also need to make sure that DHCP is running on your ISP's modem, so that modem that's connecting to the internet, because otherwise the Firewalla won't be able to get an address for itself when it first boots up. If you get all that right, which I will absolutely readily admit I messed up a few times when I was initially playing around with this, if you get that all right, the setup is pretty simple. Now, once the Firewalla Gold has been found and you've scanned in the QR code with on the sticker, then you can control the Firewalla completely from your smartphone, and then you need to connect your phone to the monitored Wi-Fi. So to that bit on after the firewall, the access point in bridge mode, the mesh network, you need to connect to that, and then you'll have the best control over your firewall. Okay, so this is the kind of a picture of what you see for the interface. As you can see, you've got kind of the network bandwidth showing you what's going on. You're told about the devices that are on the network, any alarms that are going on, and then these are all the features that you can kind of do: ad blocking, family stuff, DNS over HTTPS, a VPN. We're going to talk about some of these things, smart queue. So you go into each of these things, you dive in there, and you can set the things you want to set on the firewall. You can create rules, you can monitor what's going on. You do all that with inside of the app. So taking an example of one of those, if you went into ad blocking, so that's this one here, you go into ad blocking, then you can turn on ad blocking, and then you say what type of ad blocking. Well, Firewalla provide a kind of a default list of the services they are kind of monitoring that deliver ads, and then you can apply it to any individual device or devices, or to the whole network, and say we want to block ads. And once you've done it and that's it, then the Firewalla will start to do it. It may take a few minutes for the everything to take effect because of, you know, caching and what's going through DNS and so on. But basically, once it's up and running, it just works. And because everything is going through the firewall, then it's an assured way that it can actually block those ads. Let's just look at a couple of videos demonstrating that. Here is a famous website. As you can see, a nice big advert being shown there at the top of the page, and you don't like those, so you want to get rid of them. So getting rid of them is pretty easy. You go into ad block, you switch it on, you go into the apply to devices, you can click the whole LAN there, that will turn it all on, and that's it, the ad blocking has now been switched on. And if I now refresh that page there, you can see that the ad is not being served. Sometimes you might get a grey box, or it still might be displaying there, but the advert didn't make its way through onto your network. Similar kind of thing with family features, so you can turn things on to block out violence and other undesirable things. You can include safety for searching for the well-known search engines, and you can even block all social media activity for an hour, let's say. Try to get everybody off their phones if that's a problem you have, and get them to kind of do other things, all available there via the Firewalla. Now, another interesting feature that you might find very useful, particularly in this day and age where we are doing more and more meetings online, Zoom calls and so on, is traffic shaping and rate limiting, which generically they're calling here smart queues. So the Firewalla can set download and upload limits to basically all kinds of different things, whether it's a particular device, a category of traffic, whether it's video, gaming, to a particular IP address on a particular port, and it can prioritize that traffic to be high, default, or low. So for example, you might want to set all video conferencing stuff to be high, everything else kind of gets to normal, except for any kind of peer-to-peer stuff, which you kind of might set down to be in the background. And that way, if someone is streaming video, let's say watching Netflix, that's not going to interfere with a business call, for example. Or maybe you want to give Netflix a priority and gaming video isn't going to interfere. However you want, you really can configure the smart queue to give priority to the things that are important in your particular household, in your particular business, and less priority to things that shouldn't be consuming all of the bandwidth that you've got available. I've tested it out, great little feature. And here we are just showing some of the screens for that. So you go into the smart queue, you can turn it on. To start with, there are no rules defined. You can create a new rule. Here the example is I've got Zoom, but you can see you can actually say matching an app, in this case was Zoom, IP addresses, domains, regions, gaming sites. So you can really define what you want to do. And then I've said, let's make all Zoom calls high priority. And then you'll see once you've done that, it's now set as a higher priority. That's the way the smart queue is. Anything that's a Zoom call gets greater priority through the firewall. Everything else comes in as a second-rate citizen, which means you don't drop your Zoom calls. Very useful feature. Now, another great feature of the Firewalla is that you can actually use 2 internet connections simultaneously. So this is a relatively new feature they've added. It was added during the time that I've been testing this. Multi-WAN it's called. So here you can see this is your normal connection over to your modem router from your ISP. But if you've got a second one, which I actually happen to have, this second one here, this is a cable one I've got. This one in my house is actually one from a mobile provider, and I've got an unlimited SIM card. So I'm actually able to connect to 2 different ISPs at the same time, and the Firewall is able to be set up to use that in either a load balancing or failover setup. We'll look at that now. So there are 2 ways, load balancing or failover. Load balancing allows you to split the traffic over 2 ISPs. So some of the traffic will go down one, some of the traffic will go down the other. It's not channel bonding, so you're not going to see a general increase to the bandwidth for one particular device. However, you will see an increase on all your devices because you've now got 2 connections to the internet. And so while someone is streaming video, that may get down one connection, and while someone's doing a Zoom call, it'll get down the other connection, so you don't interfere with each other. And failover is for that time when you're really fearful, or it's necessary that the internet connection stays up all the time. When one goes down, the other one will kick in. And it doesn't matter. So if your local ISP has a problem for whatever reason, the other one kicks in and your internet still keeps working. So it's available in both ways there. And if we just look at a quick video here, you can see that I've unticked the 3rd port there from the LAN. I've said, let's create a new network. I go and say, well, it's DHCP. And then I say, let's put it on port 3. Okay, and so that now creates a second ISP connection. So now you can see there it's got LAN and ISP1, ISP2. And then I can set it to failover or to load balancing. If I set it to load balancing, I can say 50-50, half and half going down each one. And then it saves it. And that's it. The Firewall will start working in that way. So I tested this out, and my experience, again, just to repeat, it's not channel bonding, so you won't see an increase in speed from one device. But when you've got lots of devices, video streaming, gaming, you've got Zoom meetings going on, you've got normal internet usage going on, you get a combined bandwidth of the two connections together because it splits between the two. And failover works, it isn't instantaneous, it does take about 90 seconds before it kind of switches over from one to the other. And so here again, you can see some of the alerts that you get inside of the Firewalla app showing you what's happened. So if I disconnected the LAN port there, Ethernet port is disconnected, and that was at 12:38. And at 12:39, it kind of says, okay, ISP1 is down, so all traffic is now being sent to ISP2. And then at 12:40, having tested that, I plugged the Ethernet cable back in again. And at 12:42, it says, okay, ISP1 has been restored, so now it's distributing through both WANs. That was when I was using load balancing, as I showed in that video. This is a screenshot when you're using failover, so you have an active one and a standby one. And again, the same thing here, I unconnected it. 12:50, 12:51, it works out, it's down. ISP2 is now being used. And then when you reconnect, it says primary ISP restored. So the secondary ISP is now becoming standby. So it can do load balancing and failover, and it switches between the two. So you've basically pretty much guaranteed you've got internet connectivity when something goes wrong with one of your providers. Now, this is only really the beginning. There's so much you can do. Just want to mention some of them in passing. There's some VPN stuff in here. You can connect devices in your network to a VPN service via the firewall, so you can guarantee that things are happening over a VPN. You can connect two sites together. Great if you're a small business, you've got two sites. You can do site-to-site VPN, Firewalla to Firewalla VPN, and that way you can access the LANs safely. And it's got its own VPN server on board, so you can connect in from outside on the internet into your Firewalla, so you can safely connect to your LAN from the outside. So lots of flexibility because it has a VPN client and a VPN server, so some interesting things to explore there. DNS over HTTPS. Normally DNS requests are sent unencrypted. This will enable some extra layer of privacy. New device quarantine. This is quite an interesting one. If someone does connect a new device to your network, you know, as maybe in a small business, in a large household, suddenly people are connecting things and you maybe don't want them to. What's that? Who's just connected that? That automatically puts them into a quarantine, and then you can look at that, monitor that inside of the app, and then make a decision about what you're going to do. And something I didn't play with, but it looks very interesting because this is running, in fact, it's running Ubuntu 18.04 long-term service support version. It's got an Intel Celeron processor. You can actually run Docker containers on here, and they do give you some documentation about how you can run different Docker containers, so you extend the functionality of your Firewalla via Docker. That certainly is interesting. The one thing to note, of course, only 4 GB of RAM, so it is a limited resource, but maybe if you were running one extra container on there, might be something good for extending your Firewalla in the future. Okay, so summary. So what have I found out about this? Because the Firewalla Gold works inline and sits between your ISP's equipment and your LAN, then it can be a bit fiddly to set up rightly. That was my own experience. I failed multiple times because I didn't have something quite right. That's probably more because I wasn't really getting that idea in my head where it needs to sit. The connection via Bluetooth, as I said, and then the connection via... I was too used to the old way, but once you get it right, once it's set up correctly, the Firewalla Gold is very, very powerful and feature rich. So if you're prepared to set it up in line, so it's the funnel, everything on your network goes through it before it finally hits the network, before it finally hits the internet, or even hits 2 internets because you've got that dual multi-LAN support, then it can be very, very powerful. So who should buy it? Well, it's not cheap. It's over $400. So if you're a small household with just a few users in it, then this is probably overkill for what you need. If you're a larger household and you need to control what's happening on your LAN and how the internet is being accessed, that includes bandwidths, rates, what sites are being accessed, when they're being accessed, so it's all kinds of control, then actually this might be a pretty good way, certainly a way of keeping family certainly a bit safer, increases your privacy, increases your availability with the failover and the load sharing. So actually, if you've got an advanced kind of users, you've got several people in your household, dare I say it, some of them are teenagers, you know, and things are kind of, the internet is being used a lot, this might actually be quite worthwhile. If you're a small business owner with more than just a few employees, then the Firewalla Gold can certainly help you organize your LAN and protect your business. Make sure there aren't new devices being connected, make sure that employees aren't accessing things they shouldn't access, to make sure that your business is protected from attacks from the outside. So, for a small household, probably not. If you're a large household with complex needs and you need control, then yes. If you're a small business and you need control, then certainly yes. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching. My name's Gary Sims. This is Gary Explains. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you like these kind of videos, well, why not stick around by subscribing to the channel? Okay, that's it. I'll see you in the next one.